It's an honor to be introducing Noble Ackerson, the Director of Product and Emerging Technologies at Ventera Corporation. Noble's professional career is centered at the intersection of data ethics and emerging technology. He has been a major contributor to the XRSI privacy framework. Noble has come up with a fundamental privacy concept for the framework called 3 Cs. Please tell us a little bit about that. Take it away, Noble.
How's everybody doing? I mean, how is everybody doing? All right, great. All right, that's more like it. I was going to just set things up with a joke, but I'll pass. Let's jump right into it. I'm Noble, president of CyberXR, where we promote DI&I focused initiatives and try to imagine a space within these experiences that we've been hearing all about these last couple several hours, that is safe, that we'd all like to live in. I'm also a director, my full-time job, focused on ethical machine learning, and I find it very interesting to sort of bridge a lot of what I'm learning in responsible AI and what's coming with, and what's been there, frankly, with a lot of AR and VR applications. And before I start, I want to say really quickly that I bring my own biases and assumptions to the discussions that we're about to engage in, and some of the discussions that I've been sort of part of so far. For my biases, I'm all in on the rapid pace of innovation. I've been doing this work for about close to a decade. But I'm acutely aware of the social-technical issues when there isn't enough data governance, for example. And so a lot of my talk today is couched around those biases. And for my assumptions, I assume extended reality is the next computing platform. And so I hope I'm right. For all those who are here, I'm sure we all hope that we're right, but we always want to sort of focus on a lot of the mistakes that we've done in 2D applications and try not to repeat those mistakes in the future. So that's me. Whoops, what did I just do? Wrong button. All right, so to tell you a bit about me, I'm going to talk about myself in the context of a glass. How many people remember Google Glass? Pretty much, I expect every single hand here to go up. I was one of the glass holes, so Glass Squad represent. That's me. One of my applications got the attention of a founder of Google, or Alphabet, I guess. And so with this whole meta name change and Google and Alphabet, I get confused sometimes. So Glass Squad represent. On one of my expeditions to sort of pitch my startup, I go through the airport, I hop on a plane, I go through security, scanners, and all that stuff. I sit down, I'm putting my bags up, and the flight attendant comes to me and says, take off those glasses. My prescriptions were part of that those glasses, by the way. And so I go, well, what's going on? There's an uncomfortable passenger. There was no issue for the uncomfortable passenger or whoever was concerned with all the surveillance that was around. There was more an issue with surveillance, or so I thought. Surveillance meaning me recording you, but I couldn't possibly be recording. It's a tiny face computer with a little battery, and I'd have to be staring at you, and that frankly makes me uncomfortable. So I realized then that it was more about trust, or lack thereof, right? Seeing my camera, facing them at some point in time and potentially recording, there was a fear of a lack of, context. Like, is this person recording me? What is being recorded? And if so, there was no sort of choice for the people within the field of view of my gaze, right? For them to act on and say, no, don't record me, right from their phone, or with the exception of just going to the flight attendant to tell them to stop recording. So that was their choice, to go to this nice young lady who found it intriguing. And of course, there was no control either. So if I did record them, they didn't really have control over that data. It went into Google's massive data set somewhere. That's what they thought I have no idea where that thing goes. By the way, the punchline of this little long introduction to myself is that as this exchange was happening, every single person around me had their phones out recording. So people are starting to be woke. They understand that as we shed our data in exchange for the services that we need, there's a lot more of it, and because of all the breaches and all the rise in regulations, there's becoming an awareness of a lot of this stuff. And so let me get some terms out of the way really, really quickly before we jump into the talk. This is Graham Devine from Quake fame. His definition, a mixture of the real world and virtual world so that one understands each other. I really love this definition. By now, we should all know the definition. But what I want to point attention to is that story that I told you and how it made me realize the true definition. In my opinion, I'm on stage, so I'm always right. This is the true definition of privacy. It's about context. Thank you. Keep it going. Sorry. Choice and control. Context. What data do you collect? Does it move borders? How much of it do you collect? How often do you back it up? That kind of stuff. Do you want to sell my data to someone else? Choice. Do I have the agency to act on those on the context that I now understand? My consent flow. Do you really act on my wishes if I choose for you not to track my marketing cookies, for example? And of course, control. Do I have control over that data to act on my right to removal, for example? Or are the interfaces that you present to me intuitive and easy to use? Or is it just a breadcrumb, a massive tree of links and subfolders in order for me to just delete my account? And doing this from the context of the company, a show that you respect users, that privacy is a fundamental human right. Is in fact the true definition of privacy. Trust is the accumulation of all that I just talked about, transparent in its awareness, the value that you deliver, the services that you're offering, and the eventual acceptance by your users that if something happens, the inevitable breach, for example, this company will do right by me. Last definition, I couldn't find a good definition, so I basically came up with this, but it's pretty much a mishmash of other data ethics, and so this is a quick summary of it. I'm going to pause for like a second or two because I want to jump right into the presentation. Okay. So, if you're designing for XR trust within the United States, we know that there's no standard trust laws or privacy laws. Every single state is different. It's very frustrating to get your head around. And given how quickly Washington operates, think infrastructure bill and all that stuff, it's going to be a while, I think, I hope I'm wrong, before we get something that we can align with. Today in the United States, and by the way, this talk is from the perspective of the US, I know because we're here today, but there may be adjacent regulations and sort of principles to regulations in your country if you're not from the US. The two existing legal doctrines to look out for, one is disparate treatment and the other one is impact, right? For disparate treatment, it's more about purposeful consideration of a group membership, intentional discrimination without consent to that group's membership, and the goal there is procedural fairness. There's also disparate impact, where the goal is, in fact, just distributive justice, minimizing differences in outcomes, and that mostly looks about avoidable or unjustified harm, even if it was indirect or unintentional. Obviously, no one goes into unless you're trying to do harm, but a lot of these things are unintentional or indirect. XR ethics plays into designing safe environments. Today we're going to be talking about all the different ethical considerations that device makers, researchers, designers, what I'm classifying as content content developers, as well as lawmakers, regulatory bodies, and everyone in between. Of course, the end user as well. We all have a part to play in if we're going to build an XR experience for everyone. So for manufacturers, we see some of this today. They all need to sort of provide the principles, SDKs to help content developers to build better and be better stewards of the data that is collected. Content developers need to look at the true definition of privacy, context control, and choice, and bake that in by design, if I could use that phrase, from the ground up. Things they're looking for is like ethics, localization. We're going to talk about that here in a second. Regulatory bodies, if you joined the previous track, we talked about how reactive policymakers are. We want to move them and nudge them towards being more proactive, working with organizations like XRSI and other thought leaders in the industry to educate them a little bit so that if they have to make policy neutral regulations, it's future proofed, right? As much as we possibly can, because obviously we don't know what we don't know. And of course, end users, in my opinion, just have to be informed. They need to be able to act and realize that it's not really a zero-sum game anymore where I'm exchanging my data for some sort of value. It's more positive sum in that. And I think as we go along, like I showed you earlier, people are woke. They're paying attention. All right, so I'm going to rattle through 5 of these really quick, how we work across so many disparate stakeholders in designing for trust. It's going to be tough. I'm not for 1 second naive to think that we're going to check every single one of these boxes before this Nobleverse, Metaverse, whatever magic verse thing becomes a thing. But we at least should try, correct? Right? Okay, localization. And when I say localization for the VR developers in the room, I'm not talking about sort of finding yourself within a space. I'm talking more about traditional localization, where I'm talking about speech, language, culture. Same with internationalization, as you might be familiar, where we're speaking about designing interfaces to address language or culture needs across different locales. So that inherits localization. When designing for XR, we have to take into consideration sight, touch. That's today. It gets a little crazier in XR when we are also designing for speech, hearing, proprioception, and this goes into how we localize our content. Your speech input needs to be something that you design for as far as localization is concerned. Your keyboard layouts, localized shared experiences, things to think about. Next, we've heard a lot about safety. This, after all, is an XR safety track. And by the way, I want to thank Kavya and team for putting this track together. We should aim to keep everyone safe and secure by shaping the rules and practices to enable a secure and resilient immersive environment. And for that, this is one of the strongest languages the US government has ever put out. This is the FTC. If your algorithm results in credit discrimination, this is for responsible AI, by the way, but it's applicable for us, against a protected class, you will find yourself facing a complaint alleging violations of the FTC. So basically, a suit's going to come to your house if your XR application, in the domain that your focus is on, sort of falls under this umbrella. So let's be careful there. Security, we've also heard a lot about. Click, there we go. Across various stakeholders, domains, we pretty much think we well understand security and a lot of the practices. By the way, Dr. Bagili's talk scared the living crap out of me. And so I'm just basically going to slide through this one because it probably scared the crap out of you as well. The goal is to keep everyone safe, your data secure, understanding the lineage, the provenance, how your data is retained, how long it's retained for, that context that you're eventually going to be translating to your end users. So things like identity comes to mind. where identity may, depending on your use case, unlock sort of formal services in commerce, manufacturing, and if it becomes as ubiquitous someday as the internet is, if we're talking about a shared synchronous experience like a metaverse, for example, these are things that we need to start baking in from the beginning. And frankly, a lot of what I've just talked about is in your benefit as well. Localization brings more people to your app, brings more revenue to you. So it's not all shadows and darkness. I want to make things a little bit more chipper. Localization, safety, security influences how we promote diversity in XR. Designing in XR or for XR means that we should conduct research, bring your designers, your researchers, your UXR teams, and make it a diverse group to study this so that we're including all races, genders. I'll give you a couple examples. So like hand tracking and object detection should work for people with all skin colors, tones. Eye tracking, IPD, right? For example, should support pupillary, all different kinds of pupillary distances. The good news here is these are not the shadows. The good news here is a lot of device manufacturers are already doing this quite well. But as new form factors come in and change, making sure that content manufacturers are also sort of being able to sort of tap into that and recognize how they present information or experiences to users is something to be very cognizant of. So last but not least, my favorite subject, remember, the only definition that you should be caring about, the 3 C's, right? Context, anybody remember it? Context? Choice? Control, we're doing well. All right, awesome. All right, so when we talk about privacy, we're talking about PII, we're talking about protected health info, biometrically inferred data, and sensitive information. PII is pretty much well known, nothing there. Going into XR, there are going to be accounts in-world related PII and IRL related PII, especially when you're signing up for a solution. Protected health info, depending on your use case, for health, for example, it needs to be considered. Biometrically inferred data, things like interests, right? Like so. We see this a lot with ads. Being able to sort of look at some of the implicit behavioral data captured around things that like wish lists and stuff like that. We should think about how, when combined with our biometrics, for example, you get a 360 view of who a user is, and that could lead to harm if there is an inevitable breach or some data leakage or Dr. Barghili's students come hack you. All right. I'm going to end with a quote that I love, and I was listening to Niantic CEO John Hankey's talk, and it really reminded me of this quote, so I snuck this in at the last minute. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. Father John Culkin, a Fordham University professor. Tools, I think I heard Dr. Barghili mention this as well, can be used for good. They can be used for harm, right? So fire, right? We need to move away from the zero-sum approach where users shed their data in exchange for some value. And I'm always going to be a zealot about that. Designing for XR means that the data that drive these experiences should be used to help and not manipulate. Well, that's dark. Those are the shadows. Let's talk about the opportunities, right? They can also be used for good. They can also keep us together. So I ask you this, what experiences do we want to build for? What experiences do we want to design for? It's ever so important that we design and build for trust, especially in a nascent space like this. Without trust, one bad experience on one app may ruin it for you if you're within the same domain. We saw this with cardboard. As positive as that experience was, Today, some people's only experience with VR is Google Cardboard. However, it was a tool. It had its benefit. Cardboard brought a lot of people into the medium as well. So trust, through good data governance, driven by transparency, value delivery, resulting in our customers' acceptance of the consequences that we will inevitably face. And I would like to acknowledge and thank XRSI for inviting me to this. These are some of the individuals that inspire. These are the standards and regulations that sort of powered a lot of the content in this talk. And thank you. I'll take your questions.